But I want to start with you two, because you both you're both of your speeches. I thought like that was a fresh approach, or like to sustainability, and especially on farm level. But then of course, you had a very different approach to it. So both were kind of interesting to hear. But somehow I want to get a fight going here between you two. So.
Gonna hate to disappoint you on that.
Yeah. No, but I mean, we have a perspective of what's the best thing for the farmer, because we do think about that, even though most of our time goes to selling coffee, which is apparently important. But can we just have a couple of words of the argument to focus on increasing yield compared to focusing on quality in those kilos that actually come out from the farm?
Yeah, sure. So WCR is not focused on increasing yield. So that's one thing that I would say. What we're really focused on is increasing profitability. And Jacques can talk about this a little bit himself, but actually what he was talking about was coming right out of WCR. And was coming from a paper that Dr. Christophe Montagnon recently wrote about yield does not equal profitability. But very often, yield is a component of profitability. And in Ethiopia, the situation in Ethiopia is absolutely 100% different than any other origin on the planet. So certainly requires a completely different approach. Nobody has 1,000 wild varieties of Arabica growing. The problem in the rest of the world is that they have 3. so that's kind of one of the issues there.
What's your thoughts about that, or on the subject?
No, yes, of course, it's a point of balance. So it's a yield and quality. And of course, you need to produce to sell. But there is always a point where you have to stop to produce and then to think about quality. So I think the work for a farmer is more to find this point. Yeah. Also, I agree with the point is we need a local approach for each place, and we need to think in it's a problem of scale and local approach. If you come from the top, it's a top-down approach, global to local, it doesn't work. Not only in coffee, in all topics.
We talked just after your speech yesterday about all these roasteries and importers going to farms and saying, oh, can't you plant some geisha here? Or have you tried pacamara? And maybe you should have this F1 or whatever I tasted that was good. I feel like a couple of years ago that came from like the demand, our side of the industry. Now I go to farmers and they'll say, I'm going to clean this out and plant geisha here. And I feel that roasters maybe are a bit, oh, wait, I'm not going to buy it, just so you don't, there's no pressure on me. What's your thought on
I think this is a disaster, is what I think. Roasters should never tell a farmer what to plant. That's a decision that requires quite a bit of analysis and quite a decision tree. Actually, WCR has put together a significant decision tree for even should I renovate, right? Renovation is not the panacea here either. There's a lot of reasons to renovate, and there's a lot of reasons not to. Renovation is a high-risk activity. The plants are very small. You know, if you're pulling out plants that have been there for 15, 20, 25 years, they're very sturdy, you know, the cows are walking by them, no problem. You replace those with, 6-month-old plants, you really have to baby those for quite some time. So it really depends on what problems you're trying to solve. Depends on what market you're selling into. And I've heard these anecdotal stories of roasters coming down and saying, boy, if you were growing geisha, and farmers go ahead and do that. And geisha is a wild Ethiopian landrace. It's adapted to a very narrow range of environmental conditions, and it's only going to work in certain environmental conditions. And you know, a roaster coming down there does not have this knowledge or this.
But do you agree that maybe it even has like switched, so it's more actually from a farmer initiative that they say, well, we also want $4 or $5 per pound. Maybe, I mean.
Yes.
Also, there is one point, as a specialty roaster, you don't want things to be standardized. You don't want the same coffee everywhere. So it doesn't make sense to ask somebody, some place where there is no geisha, or why don't you plant geisha? You know, we need to reveal a roaster. We said before has to reveal the beans, and the farmer has to take the best from his soil, from his place. So maybe the best is not the geisha. We don't know, like Greg tell. So the one who knows is the farmer. He was waking up every day, and or maybe he doesn't know, but certainly not me as importer or a roaster who come like 1 week per year. And this is for sure. Yeah.
All right. I think maybe I'm gonna, gentleman in the white cap. Yeah.
An interesting topic that's
so the question is, how do you actually get, even if you can sit in an office somewhere in Sweden or in Portland and create these tools for the farmers, how do you make sure they actually reach the farmers and that they use them?
Yeah, this is actually traditionally the Achilles heel of agricultural research and development, where the research gets stuck in the lab and doesn't get out to the farmer, or there's not a profitability component to the research. For instance, you know, you may have all heard of biochar in terms of being able to help rejuvenate soils, and the research is coming out. There's a lot of positive research on this. And then you go to try to make 500 pounds of biochar, and you understand, wow, you need a lot of water, you need a lot of material, you need a lot of time. And suddenly you begin to see, I don't think I could do this on 20 hectares. Like, it's just not physically possible. So there's a little bit of a balance between that. But back to the piece on dissemination, one of the things, first of all, I'll say that WCR doesn't have this completely figured out yet. We're in this early phase where we're actually getting the data and doing some analysis. But let me tell you about the research design of the Global Coffee Monitoring Program, because dissemination is kind of baked into the actual research
Can
design.
you explain that word to me?
So Global Coffee Monitoring Program, if you saw my talk, this was the testing of 2 improved varieties and 2 improved agronomic treatments using the farmer's existing agronomic protocols and variety as the control. And putting these in about 1,000 around the world, big data, very predictive in its potential. So what we do here is it's actually, each one of these plots is a 3-way partnership. It's a partnership between a producer who is donating his land, who is donating his labor, and who is a decision maker in terms of picking which varieties are going to be selected and which agronomic approaches are going to be tested. Also, we partner with a supply chain partner. So very often, as you know, exporters are down here and they're already providing technical expertise to producers. And so we partner with, a Sucafina, a Caravella, an Ecom, who already has technicians in the field. And what we do is we bring down our regional agronomist to train that agronomist in the protocols of the planting and the measuring. And that agronomist then teaches maybe 6 producers that are working within their supply chain and installing these OFTTs. And what we do is we ask those supply chain partners to donate the time of that agronomist to contribute the cost of inputs, to contribute the cost of lost production, and then the producer himself is, of course, I said, donating their labor. So now what you have here are the key people who would be utilizing this information are now actually involved in designing their own experiment, collecting the data, and in doing so, they become intimately aware of all the fields and all the data that's being collected. So they have intuitively an understanding of how powerful this data is on one plot, and now they know that this same thing is happening on 120 plots in my region. It's suddenly, the wheels begin to turn about what kind of analysis, how do I want to query this data, is happening both for the farmer, but also for the export partner who's working with that farmer. So.
Yeah, I think we just, do we have any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so my question is about the presentation that Greg did. That was the...
So
There's a lot in that question.
If we say the question is, so you were talking about spreading out new varieties that work and practices that work for many. What's the risk in that project, do you see, and how do you make sure that not one company owns the resources or the possibilities to
Yes.
succeed?
So the systemic issue here is that typically agricultural research and development happens very close to the farmers, and the farmers are paying for agricultural research and development. For instance, in California, there's the California Avocado Association, and a few cents of every pound of avocados that is sold goes to support the Avocado Association. They utilize that money to do research and development, to do advertising, marketing, and also some lobbying in government on land use laws. The farmers are paying for it because it benefits them directly. I mean, they see the value in that, and they utilize that value, and they receive the value of that. Now, in coffee, that hasn't happened for a variety of reasons. Unstable governments, farmers that don't have money to spend on an extra 5, 6, 7 cents. So what has happened is that WCR is sort of a response to that systemic issue. And coming in, for instance, we have developed, I think we have something like 54, 58 new F1 varieties that we're currently testing. But it's not our strategy to develop varieties for the world. It's our strategy that we recognize there's been a lack of development. You saw on the slide 54 varieties that have been registered on the UPOV site. This is the site where breeders go to register their new varieties. So we realize there's an immediate need for an infusion of new varieties that are going to solve problems today as soon as possible. But the issue is what we really have to do is build capacity at origin for origin to be able to breed their own varieties that solve their specific problems and their specific breeding targets. So the strategy to do that is something called a breeding hub. WCR launched its first breeding hub in Rwanda. This is the East African Breeding Hub, and what we do here is we bring in, we've done, remember the scatter shot dots of all the different varieties that showed genetic distance on that slide I had? So what we've done is we've taken that whole collection and we've selected 100 varieties that we call the core collection, which represents about 95% of the genetic diversity in the available Arabica varieties right now. So, and we have information about these. So we give the breeding hub this core collection, and then we begin to do workshops on breeding. And the idea here is that the East African countries, their breeders come to this breeding hub, gain knowledge and expertise about the core collection. They bring their own locally adapted varieties, okay, that are working pretty good, but have some problems. You know, whether it's a yield problem, whether it's a quality problem, whether it's a disease problem, and they use this genetic diversity to breed into their locally adapted varieties to create the varieties that are right for their particular origins.
Yeah.
But so, who owns this varietal?
Well, in this case, the breeder who is coming in. So if it's a Ugandan breeder and they're bringing in their own adapted varieties, that becomes the property of that Ugandan variety. Now, the varieties that WCR is doing, the 58 that we have, WCR is definitely going to control the IP, the intellectual property on that, but for only one reason, so that nobody else can take it and prevent it from getting out. Everything WCR does is completely open source, and that's why we will own it so that we can keep it free.
Isn't in Ethiopia, Jacques, as I understand it, the government or the agriculture department send out seeds to the smallholder farmers. So they're actually doing a kind of a making sure the most productive and resistant plants comes out.
Yeah, there is a research center, which is a GMO research center. They do the research and also they produce the seed for the.
Do you think that's a good thing? Because I have naively been thinking that the Ethiopian farmers, they're not empowered and they can't do as they in Central America or South America. They can't even choose their own. They don't even know what they're growing. But
if we do a little bit some history, in the past, farmers, they were withdrawing the seeds from the wild forest around. They were going to the wild forest. They were looking at the trees, and they were picking 2 or 3, 4 different type of trees to plant in their plots. They were doing this because they wanted some diversity in order to fight against a disease, a fungus, a pest, whatever. Then this was the older style. So the result of this, you have very localized varieties. You have something which is practically it's a way to fight against many problems. And you have some in the cup, you have something very unique from each place. During the 60s, 70s, the Ethiopian government, they did a lot of research, which was good because at that time they identified a lot of varieties. For example, when you have a 74-110, which is known, that means 74 is the year of discovery, 1974, and 110, this is a sample number. So the researchers, they were going in the forest, they were withdrawing a sample, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then they came back to the lab. Oh, 110 is a variety, okay, 74, 110. So they discovered a lot of, they identified a lot of varieties during the 70s. You have 74, 112, 110, 75, a lot. And then they did this because they had a big problem in Kenya also about CBD, and they were looking for resistant varieties. Because they have so much asset that when they have a disease, the reflex is to go to the forest and to look and to find the solution in the wild. They don't have to breed. So after that, the GRA was distributing the same variety everywhere. For example, 74-110, which is resistant to CBD, to rust, with a good yield. They were spreading it everywhere, in Sidama, in Gedeo, in Djibouti, and this variety is coming from Metu, which is Ilubabor, under Jima appellation in the west. And then today they realize, okay, we start to give the same profile to all coffees by doing this. So now today they are coming back. They are going to the old farmer in Agaro, in Anfilo, everywhere, and we're asking, where did you get your seed? They have trees like 100 years old. Where does it come from? From the forest around? Okay, give us some sample. And they are trying to, today they are trying to distribute the local varieties, not necessarily the most resistant, the more productive. And so they want to come back to give some typicity to the appellation and to the terroir, which is, I think it's...
So maybe when we say heirloom, it's actually true soon, again.
Yeah,
or I guess it is all
true.
the time.
I think it's true.
Yeah.
Heirloom basically means I don't know what is it.
Exactly. That's the best buzzwords we have when no one understands. Fufa? Big questions. I think we should keep it quite short. But
okay. Yeah. So I think so WCR has a partnership with The number, you have to go to our website to get this, but every country that we're working in, and I think it's something like 27 or 28, we have a relationship. We go in through the front door, and that means we go in into that country through the National Coffee Institute. So we have a very active partnership with all the government entities. This is absolutely vital for us to do that. We have producers all the time that come to us and say, hey, I want to do some OFTTs. I'll sponsor an international multi-location variety trial on my farm. Let's bring this stuff in. And we can't go in through the back door this way because ultimately you need the support of the government in order to disseminate information, in order to build trust and to coordinate efforts and leverage efforts.
Okay, maybe one last question. Yes.
Very obviously, I'm not a farmer, so I know nothing basically. But
No one does here.
What I wonder is how long-term are these solutions? When I compare this to one another, I see that what Jacques is telling is we're going actually back because we notice that it's way more long-term going well, and it's not only coffee adapting to the climate, but also the surroundings adapting to the coffee, right? So there will also always be what I know about it, new diseases, new things coming up that are kind of adapting and changing again, and then within 5 years we need to find other varieties that go again to that. What I hear you say, Greg, is we develop something very strong, but it's now. What within 5 years, 10 years, and so on, because then it's like a never-ending story.
It is a never-ending story.
Yeah, I just I guess very concrete. The question is, how long-term are these different solutions that we're talking about?
What I want to add to that is that one of the things that I've seen while traveling is that in Ethiopia is basically, from what I've seen, the only country that is not struggling so much with diseases compared to the other ones. So I can only make the logical conclusion there that it's more sustainable to go back instead of creating new things.
Do you want to speak to that? Okay. Ethiopia has well over 1,000 different varieties of Arabica. So that genetic diversity is key to keeping all of that genetic diversity alive. It's fantastic, and it is the only place in the world where you find that. So when you're talking about coffee and origins and farmers, Ethiopia, you sort of have to just put it over here, and it's its own microcosm. With other farmers, as many farmers there are is a different situation. For instance, balancing production and quality. Well, that decision is completely dependent on who you're selling your coffee to. If you're selling your coffee into a market where quality is not the issue, then you make a decision for higher levels of production. If you're selling to a higher quality market, then it's different decisions that you're making. So the idea here is that farmers need tools in order to make decisions that are best for their particular situation. And right now, the number of those tools, these agronomic tools come out of agronomic research and development. They have for the last 150 years. And how that typically works is you've got farmers that are out there just trying all kinds of stuff. And sometimes you find something that seems to be very promising. But what you have to do is you have to test that in a statistical way. Because just because it's working for one farmer does not mean you can extrapolate those results to other farmers. So that's, for instance, in the agronomy trials of the OFTTs, the on-farm technical trials that I was telling you about, 1,000 of them around the world, we are not testing anything that hasn't already worked somewhere. So the idea here is where does it work well, where does it work okay, and where does it not work at all? This is the information that farmers actually need. And then you were talking about sort of this arms race, right? You develop a variety, it's resistant to fungus, and then the fungus mutates, and you need a new variety, right? Yes. Yes, that's exactly what happens. It happens more when a crop is, when the genetic diversity of a crop is very, very narrow. And that's the situation we are right now with approximately 80% of all the coffee that's grown. Very, very narrow genetic base there. So one of the outcomes of the WCR breeding program, it will be an immediate injection of genetic diversity onto the farmer's fields, which seems like a going forward, but it's actually making it look a little bit more like what's happening in Ethiopia that has 1,000 varieties and a wide genetic diversity in the field.
Just also, I wanted to underline that a coffee agro-system is it's a system where you have different parameters and all interact each other. So the variety and anyone is not the only answer. So this is the first point, which is very important to understand. The rest is contained in Ethiopia, not only because of the variety, but because of the way they work, the agro-system they use. And you can see this, and that's why it's very difficult to make a recipe and to say, okay, plant this tree on the plot, and it will be okay. No, it will depend on where you are, what you want to do, and the nature of the soil and everything. So, and all this interaction is very difficult to modelize because it's too much possibility, too much big data. It's a huge work. And second, we are not really going back. It's like Pascal said, I'm a dwarf on the shoulder of a giant. So we are receiving the knowledge from the past, and we do a little bit more. And the story for the variety I told about, it's a good example because the work they did during the 17 wasn't so bad because they identified a lot of varieties. We know more today. So we can go ahead, and what we see today is improvement with the knowledge of all what happened in the past. So this is important. We are not going back. And even if they look like very old style farmer, they have some knowledge, and it's a dynamic. This is very important to understand. It's not like. Yeah.
Can I ask a question to all of you? We have had, been talking about sustainability from an environmental situation, from a farmer economy situation, and from many perspectives. Are you optimistic about the future? Is it getting better? Or are we on a slippery slope for the future? And then I want you to just raise your hands. How many are optimistic for things getting better for the farmers and for the coffee trade? Okay, on that positive note, I think we you didn't raise your hands.
Well, I did raise my hand, but
okay,
I'll tell you, my
I was just looking the other way. That's okay. Yeah.
When I see the limited tools that producers have and the additional tools that they will soon have, that makes me very optimistic. But my role at World Coffee Research as the partnership director is to coordinate the financial support of this work. So I'm a little bit up and down. I see a big financial support fall through, and I become a little pessimistic. I land a large new partner who begins supporting us in a new way, I become more optimistic because really what we're trying to do here has never ever been done. We're going essentially to the grocery store owner who sells watermelons, and we're asking him or her to support watermelon research. That's sort of what we're doing here, except in this case, you all buy only one thing and sell one thing, and that's coffee, so you're a little bit more vested. But never before has this end of the value chain been invited, been asked, been empowered to support agricultural research and development. And the jury is still out whether or not we will be successful. Okay? I don't know. It's never been done before. I'm out here asking you all for help in terms of, hey, how are we going to do this? WCR needs about $10 million a year. It's not a lot, but $10 million a year, every year, for quite a few years here. I mean, research is ongoing. This international multi-location variety trial is definitely going to return out results in 5 years, but the results really become profound at 8 years. The Global Coffee Monitoring Program, this is a global platform that we can roll out new varieties with speed and accuracy very quickly. It would be a massively powerful tool for the industry. You know, we have 400 plots in the ground. We need 1,000 plots in the ground. We don't have the money committed to go all the way 1,000. We're raising that as we need it. So sometimes I'm very optimistic, and sometimes I'm not as so optimistic. We just had a budget meeting last week, I will tell you, and the way we were projecting revenue very conservatively, and our new CEO, Vern Long, Dr. Long, said, it looks like primarily we're going to have money to do the Global Coffee Monitoring Program next year and not the International Multi-Location Variety Trial. And it broke my heart. Like, we've had this trial in the ground for 4 years. We're collecting cherry now. This is where the payoff is. And, you know, we're like an engine sucking air. So, am I optimistic? I am, because every person I talk to in this room says, we love what you're doing. So we need to convert this love into action. And if everybody participates and if everybody's contributing a little bit, nobody's contributing anything. And so that's what we need.
Optimist? Are things getting better? I mean, we're paying record high prices. We're selling coffee for more money than ever, at least in this room. We know more about quality, and
Yes,
is it helping?
I would say I'm pragmatic. And yes, in a way, I'm optimistic because you are here, and I live in Africa. You know, a lot of producers who want to connect with you, who want to prepare coffee for you. So yet there is a kind of a dynamic, but everything has to come from the field, and it has to be understood by all actors. So we need to find a common language to talk each other in order to go to the same direction. And this is very difficult because we are talking about a value chain which is in 4 continents, different languages, different culture, so it's hard to understand each other. And cool. So I could say
That's why we need to meet and act together and learn together, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think if no one else, yes, no, yes. Tim, are you happy with the event? Anything you want to add? Someone else happy? Good? Andreas, are you happy?
Yes.
Are we rounding this off?
Can I throw this away?
Coffee, anyone? All right, thank you so much for sharing.